Welcome to day 152 on the trail. We have four readings for today. From 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 13 through 4:11, Deuteronomy 31 verses 1 through 29, Psalms 144 and 145, and 1 Maccabees 14 verses 16 through 49. Today in Deuteronomy 31, we find the final words of Moses and the consecration of Joshua as the next leader of the Jewish people. Moses is now 120 years old, and his journey ends here, just outside of the Promised Land. The reason Moses is not permitted to enter the land was discussed on day 112 in the story found in Numbers 20. Moses' final message is not as encouraging as we might expect. God is fulfilling his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. However, Moses tells the people, beginning in verse 16, "Then this people will begin to prostitute themselves to foreign gods in their midst, the gods of the land into which they are going. They will forsake me, breaking my covenant that I have made with them. My anger will be kindled against them in that day." As we continue through the Hebrew Bible, this harsh warning given by Moses will indeed come to pass. The people will turn away from God. They will face division, wars, destruction, and deportation by their enemies. Yet, we will also see God's continued compassion and mercy. What strikes me most in this passage is the responsibility that is given to the parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents to pass along their faith and commitment to God. As we continue reading the Hebrew Bible, we will see each generation sliding further and further away from their faith and trust in God. I am forced to ask, and for myself as well, how much of this descent toward destruction lies at the feet of those who were reluctant or unwilling to actively and passionately share their faith to their children and grandchildren, to their friends and neighbors? I pray that we do not make the same mistake through what we do or leave undone. And this brings us to a similar theme in 1 Peter today. So in 1 Peter, there are a couple of verses that I would like to explore. Let's start with a couple of the most difficult verses. 1 Peter 3, beginning in verse 18. "For Christ also suffered for sins, once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring you to God. He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and made a proclamation to the spirits in prison, who in former times did not obey, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah, during the building of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were saved through water. And baptism, which this prefigured, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, with angels, authorities, and powers made subject to him." The questions here typically revolve around the statement, "in which he also went and made a proclamation to the spirits in prison." Who are the spirits that Peter is referring to? And where is this prison located? Suggestions range from the Nephilim leading up to the flood narrative in Genesis, who we talked about on day 4, to the souls who have died prior to the resurrection of Jesus. The short answer is, we cannot answer this question with any certainty. However, we should be careful that in looking for answers that we might not be able to find with any confidence, at least on this side of heaven, that we miss the central point that Peter is trying to make here. That is, following his death, Jesus went and announced his sovereignty and authority over these spirits, wherever they might be. The power of the enemy has been defeated once and for all. This may be why Peter moves so quickly onto baptism. As Noah and his family were saved from death and destruction in the ark, So we have been rescued from sin and death through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Baptism is not a mere ritual of initiation, but a powerful participation in the death and resurrection of Jesus, a symbol that participates in our new reality as part of God's kingdom. Baptism is a gift, an outward expression of an inward change and a new identity. Now we are brothers and sisters of Christ, to whom has been given all authority and power in heaven and on earth. The powers of darkness and deception have been defeated, and we can now live with courage and confidence in the one who has set us free. The second text I want to look at today is found in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 15 and 16, which read, "Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and reverence." Here Peter calls his readers, and us, to be prepared when facing misunderstanding or criticism. The language here reflects that of a courtroom, but it is being applied to informal conversations between followers of Jesus and those who are questioning or attempting to discredit their faith. We find similar instructions from the Apostle Paul to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, which says, "Do your best to present yourselves to God as one approved by Him, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly explaining the word of truth." And again in 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning in verse 2, "Proclaim the message. Be persistent, whether the time is favorable or unfavorable. Convince, rebuke, and encourage with the utmost patience in teaching. For the time is coming when people will not put up with sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own desires, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander away to myths." This is one of the primary goals for the trail. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of content on the internet today, with widely varying ideas and opinions that are related to theology, ethics, morality, everything from how the world will end to how it began. Therefore, it is imperative that we spend quality time hearing from the words that have been handed down to us in the pages of the Scriptures. And that is exactly what we are doing along the trail. However, there is one more important point here. Remember that the Bible is a living document. We have not been given a list of commandments or requirements or an instruction manual for life sent directly from God. God did not give us an autobiography. God does not tell us His own story. Instead, we have a biography. Incredibly, God has chosen to tell His story through His followers, and that includes us. We have the privilege and responsibility to share His story. Therefore, we should make every effort to better understand the stories and texts that have been handed down to us, so that we can both better understand them and then pass them along to the next generation. Also, you and I may be the first Bible that people will read. Before they have an opportunity to open the pages of the Scriptures, they start with us. So, what story is your life telling about God? What will people read in our actions and in our lives? When the world reads your story, will they hear God's story? Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.